Welcome to the Modern Mythos Podcast, a show dedicated to Call of Cthulhu and other investigative horror games. I'm Seth Skorkowski.
And I'm John Hook. And together we'll discuss writing, game mastering, and player tips, and how you can apply them to your table. Today, we're joined by Drew Shirley, actor, director, and friend of the show. Hey, welcome to the show, Drew.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Man, this is, the current renaissance, which has been going on for a while, I think, of role-playing, is really getting into mainstream media with so many role-playing game shows. We've got the Critical Role, Joe Magdalena, I can't pronounce his last name, Deborah Ann Wall, Brian Posehn. There are so many people out there who are in show business who are, Vin Diesel, right? There's so many people in show business who are heralding role playing, and it's awesome that we know someone in show business that's heralding role playing.
Yeah, Vin Diesel's been championing it for a bit, so yeah, I'm glad.
Just a bit.
Be among. Yeah. No, it's a cool crossover right now. Whereas Twitch and YouTube and everything else has made this kind of thing you did at a birthday party when you were 12 with your friends or your dad or your mom into a thing that is consumed and kind of viewed in the same way that we do theater or film or musicals. And it's a really interesting thing where it's gone from this communal private experience to kind of now a much different communal public experience,
right?
Of shared storytelling.
So before we get into the weeds, if you would, Drew, please, just kind of let the audience know a little bit about you. I introduced you as an actor and a director, but can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Just briefly, I'm a person. I grew up in Kansas City, actually, Kansas City, Kansas.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so not too far from you. And I ended up once I finished school, moving out to Los Angeles, and I kind of went to grad school, kind of learning to. I think when you go to grad school for acting, one, you're like, I don't know if you're preparing yourself for a real job anywhere, but one thing with like a master's in acting, like the thing is like, I think you learn to talk about acting and maybe understand it. I don't know if it makes you a better actor. I don't know if acting works like that all the time, but there's an ability to kind of discuss it and an ability to kind of pick it apart and also maybe enjoy when it works, talking about it. And then what I really fell in love with while I was there was directing. And that led me to LA. A buddy that I had directed in some Shakespeare was working on a horror film. And I was a person who hated horror growing up. Like at a birthday party, I remember like being 8 or 9, my dad got, Scream, and all the guys wanted to watch it. And I turned away, like sat somewhere else at my own birthday. This is terrible. But anyways, ended up working, going out there, and he knew me as a director. So he was like, just say you're an assistant director. And they believed me. And so I was an AD on set. And that's nothing like being a director for theater. An AD on set is an entirely different thing. You're kind of more of a person who needs to understand everyone else's job and understand times and understand how to make the thing happen. You're kind of more like a principal at a school as opposed to like the creative person.
Nice.
So I had to kind of figure that out quickly. Luckily, I had like made a bunch of my own like films with my buddies and stuff. So I knew how equipment worked. I knew what to expect of people. I knew how to treat people, hopefully. Anyways, a producer saw me doing that job and saw me working with a bunch of extras in a big group. And that's the kind of stuff I kind of feel comfortable with, like thanks to D&D and other stuff. And so he thought I was the real thing. And so he ended up hiring me for a bunch of other really bad horror films. And so I kind of balanced my time in Los Angeles between like working on bad horror films to like make money and then doing like Shakespeare and Chekhov and things that I love. And then I met my wife, and she lives in Chicago. And so I moved there and married her, and we got a kid. And up to the pandemic, I was like working at Chicago Shakes and had a couple shows I was directing. And then the pandemic kind of drop kicked all that. And my little girl was born the day we went into lockdown here.
Oh my gosh.
She's coming up on 2 years old now.
Wow.
And
Congratulations. That's
oh yeah,
awesome.
she's incredible. She's amazing. And my buddies here and buddies over, online that I've been able to play role playing games with and stuff kind of kept me sane. So that's kind of my story. I really love telling stories with people that I love, and whether that's theater or film or definitely role playing games. And I actually got hooked on Cthulhu through kind of my own kind of following trailing interests, but I did see one of Seth's YouTube videos for an adventure I was about to run, and it was great to see like a personality like that, like talking about this stuff, and it got me really excited and interested. And so Cthulhu's been a huge hit with all the groups I've run it for.
That is awesome
Yeah.
for a guy who wasn't into horror. Come on.
Well, for a guy whose career is built on lies.
Yeah.
Now, you could also do a comedy called like The Accidental Horror Director out of that. So
Right.
just the odd man that keeps falling into the job because he doesn't know what he's doing, that everybody thinks he's a genius for doing it differently than everybody else.
This guy acts like he doesn't know. Look at him go. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like he's so cutting edge. He's trying stuff nobody's ever tried before. It's because he's clueless.
That's right.
Well, it's funny you mention horror movies. Like I remember as a kid, I had to leave the movie Gremlins halfway through because that movie scared the holy fuck out of me.
Mm-hmm.
And like the trailer for Return of the Living Dead, like gave me nightmares. And my older brother, who just was merciless, exploited that for years because the Tarman zombie and that thing like freaked my shit out.
Yeah.
And there was a
For
little
good
kid,
reason.
kid, and John was probably like 40 at this time. Was Michael Jackson's Thriller came out, and my babysitter wanted to stay up late to watch it, so I watched Thriller, which scared the pants off me. And then, like right after that, my parents picked me up and took me home, like just scared out of my mind. And then I ended up becoming, a horror author and all this.
Yeah.
So I think the Frady Cat Kid understands horror better than somebody that was like, that didn't frighten me. It's like, no, I know scary because when I was a kid, those puppets terrified me.
Yeah, exactly. I watched RoboCop when I wasn't supposed to, and now I understand being scarred. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I won the only one.
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. So we had a couple of questions. Wanted to throw your way, Drew. Maybe you can kind of bring some insight on how someone who has theatrical background and how that might apply to role playing, and maybe even specifically Call of Cthulhu role playing. So be that how you will, it's your experience, right? So like being a keeper, how is being the keeper like being a director for a film or a director of a theater?
Yeah, I think the big thing with that is, for me at least, one, I just want to like start all of this with, this is all subjective, and like whether you're an actor or a director or you're running a Call of Cthulhu game, like there's no right way to do any of this. I think there's different takes on it. So I definitely don't want to say that my way, what works for me, is the way, but my hope is that kind of talking about some of this stuff is helpful, new ways to look at things or reinforces ideas you've already had. But my kind of thought is that as a director, my job is usually I get a script and I'm working on my own for 3 to 6 months, maybe a year, or maybe it's happening quick and I have like 4 weeks. But it's my job to kind of come up with a concept. It's my job to come up with themes. It's my job to come up with what's important to me about the story. If I'm going to direct Macbeth, what about Macbeth really resonates for me? What makes me feel something? And then, so it's my job to like fall in love with this story. It's my job to own this story. It's my job to kind of be obsessed with this story. But then the big twist comes when other people get in the room. And it's my job to kind of hand off that story. So as a director, what you're trying to do is you come in fueled with all this information, all of these ideas, and all these ways you want to push the story. But as you're working on it in rehearsal or when you're on the film set, the big key, I think, is finding a way to hand off ownership to the actors, the editors, the designers. What you're trying to do is inspire people to make choices that you wouldn't have thought of. At the same time, you're trying to keep in your pocket that core truth, that thing that you wanted to do with the story, the thing you wanted to say or you wanted to talk about. But at the same time, it's all of these voices kind of coming together that creates the kind of magic, the communal storytelling, the thing that we kind of can't define that makes it special and unforgettable. And it's very much the same whenever I'm at a table with players. It's how can I find ways to take the thing that I'm excited about and get them excited about it? How can I find ways that they own their characters and they're having a conversation between each other for 20 minutes that doesn't involve me, that matters much more to them, you know?
Right.
How can we put them in a position to succeed? It's this really interesting. I think we get so excited, and it really shows up, I think, for all of us, anyone who's ever run a game at the end of the night where you have this piece of you that goes like, did I do a good job? Like, did they have fun or whatever? And it's like this pressure we put on ourselves at the start when we first show up of like, that this is about us. And it's just like being a human. It's like trying to have that bigger idea of like everyone's living as the first person in their story, like seeing the world through their point of view. And so when you show up, it's how do we light all these people up around the table? How do we figure out ways to make this night special for each of them, as opposed to like making them move around the table in the way that we hope, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I normally live my life, though, trying to live through Seth's. I always think about what would Seth do? And that guides me through my day.
Man, that's a terrible. No. Yeah, well, I think a lot it's because I love the comparison of a game master to a director. And the problem is there are so many different types of directors, and that means so much to different people that a lot of people also hear that and they get the kind of the wrong impression.
Yeah.
Because they'll think of the director who does not allow any improvisation. And they're absolutely controlling. Every detail is storyboarded out, and the actors really don't get any creativity at all because the director is like this. So they'll picture a Kubrick, and it's like, no, not a Kubrick, more of like a director of an improv troupe. Somebody that has to at least keep the damn cats on the stage. But so it's like, because I always had like, I do want to plan, but at the same time, once the game begins, it's just kind of like, well, let's just see if this worked. It's more like I kind of pushed the button and the machine started, and the most I could do at this point is just run around it furiously with some WD-40 to keep the damn gears moving. But
I think that's exactly right. Yeah, I think that's like the thing that I always try and think about it is whether I'm directing on something or I'm running a game. It's like I've done all the prep. I've done all that prep so I can be present when they're making these choices and react to them. I think based on what, the thing you just said, Seth, it made me think of the best lesson I ever had about directing was I had a really bad director really early, and I had to work with him multiple times. And his thing that he did was he would have everyone freeze and he would move one actor off the stage. He would replace that actor. He would say, let's go back 30 lines or so. And he would perform it as that actor. And then he would stop us and tell the actor to get back in and do it exactly how he did it. And he would do that with everyone. And so his shows were always good. They weren't bad shows, but they were never great. They were never special. And you never had that moment where you saw the thing, the like life that makes storytelling, and whether it's acting or film or, whatever, the thing that makes us want to watch it when we recognize our own humanity. And like when we're sitting around a table playing one of these games, it's the same thing in my head where it's like, I don't want to ever step into the player's job. I want to let them do their job, and I want to do mine because they're very different.
Yeah, and I and countless other game masters have at least got through the phase where we forgot that, and it quickly went downhill because we did make it where we were trying to be too controlling of it, and it was just crappy games, or we thought that I guess it was more about like our vision, and kind of lost absolute sight of what the hell we were doing, and you learn the hard way once you step out of lines that way.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a thing that you have to do. You have to make the mistake to learn it sometimes, for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The game master being able to sense the clues or sense the direction that the players want to take that story and be able to adapt to that direction, and still, because Drew, as you said, loving the story and knowing it well enough that you are pliable. And so if your players want to move in a certain direction, especially with investigative horror games, the game master, the keeper, needs to be able to move those clues ahead of them, and you can still have your mystery, have it unfold, and they're going to gain that information. It may not be exactly as it was originally scripted, but because they are in control of the direction of the story, and you just put those clues in their way. Something that kind of happened to me is I have a scenario that I wrote called Shadow over Providence. Now, for whatever reason, when I wrote that, it didn't occur to me to put a basement in the building until we started doing playtesting. And in the very first group, the playtesters were like, "We want to go to the basement." In my head, I was like, I was Scooby Doo, and I went, "Basement?" And then I was like, "Yes, of course, let's go to the basement." And I'm on the side going, "I must add basement. Well, what can we find in the basement? What do you look for? Well, what about this?" I was like, "You're right, that's down there," and just, keep going with it. So, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And I think it's that thing of like, I think that's the thing. Like, before you get to the table, the story's yours. But once you're at the table, it's their story. It's not yours. Like, you're a part of it. And like that idea, exactly what you just said, it's like, now there is a basement because tonight in this story, there's a basement, and they'll never know.
And I actually think the big thing that Drew said that really, really resonates with me is, as a director, your job is to get impassioned about it, fall in love with it, think this is the greatest thing, and then get the actors to fall in love with it and become passionate, think that's the greatest thing. Because another, I guess, problem that a lot of game masters have is they might fall in love with the world of the game, and they don't actually make sure that their players fall in love with it or give them a reason to fall in love with it. They just kind of assume that they're going to like it, but they don't give them a reason to. Just the most successful games that I've had are the ones where the players were just as passionate about the story or the world or what's going on as I was. But if I'm haven't sold it to them correctly, then, and they're not on board with it, then it always feels like going through the motions, and it's just, there is a game feel of like, this is the part of the game where we go to the warehouse, let us investigate the warehouse, versus they're all on board with it because they're in love with everything as well. And I think that's actually a big one, is you have to get your cast as excited about the material as you are. And if you're not excited about it, they're not going to be excited about it, or you're just going to kill their buzz. But if you're excited about it and they're not, then no matter how excited you are, it's never going to hit good or great or whatever, because they're constantly behind you on this. You're having to drag them through it, and that's exhausting, and it's not fun to play if you're not excited about it. So that's the big one that really kind of stuck out to me, is like, yeah, I've learned that one the hard way. I wish somebody had told me that a long time ago.
Yeah.
So, Drew, as a director, do you have any specific keeper tips or perspectives for maybe preparation or running?
Yeah, I got tons of stuff. I love talking about this, and I honestly love talking to you guys. Such a nice, it's just, this is the one thing in my life I feel like I could just really, like, not all knowing or anything, but just like, or like that I know even a lot, but just the idea that I love this so much. It's like a big part of who I am, is like this.
Yeah,
how do we tell
same
stories?
Community.
Yeah, it's just really nice to get to talk about how we tell stories and how we can, like, help people. I think that's the big thing, help people feel seen. I think that the thing you were saying, Seth, there towards the end, I was just made me think about, as far as tips, like listening, that I think so often as a director, you think it's your job to make a really wise statement, or to like come in at the start and get everyone pumped. And that's, like, that that opening statement can be important to inspire confidence and stuff. But I think that far more important is the ability to listen and retain what's happening in the room and be able to react and respond to what people need. And I think that that's like that idea of like, I'm dropping out this thing I'm really excited about, but they're not. Is there something else they are excited about? I think that's the reason like most like D&D games start in bars, I think actually is because it's like this foreign location that like some of us, we go to bars occasionally or whatever, but like it's not our regular spot. So it's a little alien to us and it's full of possibility. There are so many different things inside of this room, whether it's a chance for violence, a chance for thievery, a chance for flirting, a chance for business deals, a chance for an opportunity to go on a grand adventure. Like there's so much possibility in the room. And so like, the reason they started in a bar, I feel like, is so that all those players are sitting there and you get to see what they choose. What are they interested in? And you get to start responding to that. I think listening is the big thing. And the trap I fall into sometimes is I get so excited running a game, I talk too much, as opposed to maybe I've made my point already. I don't need to make it 3 times.
Oh, word.
Yeah.
I feel you.
And yeah, because I'm so excited and I want to see in their eyes that they got it. You know, they're as excited. But instead, if I can just say it once and then watch and then listen for the things that they're actually excited about and listen for the NPCs that they love, listen for the NPCs that they hate and respond to that. Give them more of that.
Well, yeah, because there's the NPCs they love and then there's the NPCs they hate. Then there's the NPCs they love to hate. And,
yes.
and
Yeah.
That's the hardest one for me. Is like it's like I hate this guy. Give me more of him. Like and it's never the one you freaking expect. It's always when you pull out of your butt at the last second versus the one
especially if it's your buddies.
Like stats written for. It's like no, it's the doorman at the hotel who somehow became the real villain in everyone's minds. I see a lot of it as like kind of the same stuff that I have with like a good manager at a job, which is being able to like listen and to know that everybody requires like different management style, that sort of thing. That there's the idea of like my way is the only way because that's the way I did it is very often one of those people that kind of get promoted out of competence, you know, where somebody is a really good salesman. But that doesn't make them a good sales manager because being a good sales manager is you have to know how to talk to each individual person under you and motivate them in the way that motivates them and understand that that isn't the same way that would have worked on you. And being a GM is a lot like that, is you have to kind of determine what it is that works on the people around the table and not necessarily what works for you. Mm-hmm. And I think that isn't something that most people innately have. Mm-hmm. It is something that I think a lot of people have, but they've never honed that skill or ever had to think about it. But so the idea of, I know that this is exciting for me, but I got 5 people around the table and every damn one of them has a different thing that they're excited about or a different type of motivation. And then you add like the Inception other level to it of like, but then what would inspire their character of just you know, now we're entering the realm of madness because it's like, okay, what inspires my friends? Okay. What inspires my friends' imaginary friends?
We're going too deep. Yeah. Yeah. We can only do one thing at a time. Right. I was thinking too, another thought I just had was the idea of like, that's something I really work on a lot. And I think a good tip / thing to aspire to is a kind of neutrality in when you're being a keeper. And what I mean by that is that you are the world and you are the characters and you're not their characters. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that like when a character makes a choice in a room and says like, I'm going to scream at that person, you don't need to add on an emotion to what they just said, or like, okay, Daryl is crying and screaming and his face is red and he says this, just let what they said be enough. And you don't have to be their ally or enemy. You have a kind of neutrality. My favorite game masters do that because to me, that makes the world magic for me. I feel like, cause then it's players playing inside a world that anything can happen. It's a thing I always aspire to, is to try and have that kind of, they don't quite know what I'm up to when I'm running the game. especially in Call of Cthulhu.
That is the absolute dream. And I've always had that with every game of like, I don't want them to know what I'm doing. It was one of the old, I think Gygax talked about in like Tomb of Horrors is like, just occasionally like roll the dice and ask them what a
Yes.
certain stat they have is,
Yes.
and
Oh my
pretend
God.
you make a note. It was the first time I'd ever read Game Master mind games of like, wait, what? Like, yeah, you want to actually keep the tension around the table by occasionally rolling a die, looking very interested in it, but it doesn't matter. Just it's for them to see you rolling a dice, and they're like,
Yeah.
what's he up to? Oh my god, yeah, and like, and that keeps the excitement going. And I think a lot of people hear that and they see that as a very antagonistic way, but it's like, you know what? I go to a haunted house. I expect them to like, give me a thrill, and it's setting the mood. It's not to be antagonistic. It's to like keep that air of mystery. Of every time they open a door, they're like, okay, is this what they were rolling the die about? Or you suddenly ask them a weirdly specific question, where it's like,
Yeah.
okay, so there's four pillars in the room. You said you're standing next to which one? Which one are you standing next to? Also, I start really analyzing this. You don't give a shit. Now I've had that backfire on me where all of a sudden it's like 30 minutes and they're doing like some sort of bizarre, thing around it, and I'm like, Jesus, I wanted to get a paranoid, but they snapped. I didn't know that was all it took. Like, oh, shit. I want to be like, guys, I was just fucking with you. Stop.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's also that fun thing of like, they don't know that. So for them, that's just as exciting, even though for you, it's not. It's like for them, it's 30 minutes of paranoia. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but one thing though is you're mentioning the bar. So that's the big cliche of like, they shouldn't start in a bar. I always like to say is like Han Solo, from his point of
Yeah.
view, the entire Star Wars saga began in a bar when a wizard and a farm boy walked in and said, "We need a ride." So it does work.
Right.
Just from his point of view. Marion, that's how she did the whole Raiders of the Lost Ark, because she was hanging out in a bar winning a drinking contest, and her ex-boyfriend walked in, and adventure ensued. So
Right.
I think some good stories started off in a bar.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Nice. All right, so Drew, with the assumption that role playing is analogous to acting, is there anything that a non-professional actor could do to improve their role playing?
That's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the listening thing we talked about for Keeper is just as important for people playing a game, and I think that that's always the hardest thing to do when we're worried about ourselves, and especially when we're worried about our own performance at the table. But if there's a way that you can free up a piece of yourself to just listen and respond, to the other characters around the room, I think one nice kind of cheat or like little hack you can do is taking the one I think of first is like Fiasco, but I think Alien RPG does it. I'm sure a bunch of others do it, but the idea of connecting one or two other characters to yourself through like extremes. So this is a character that I like. Maybe that's because it's my brother, or maybe it's because this is a person I'm married to, or maybe it's because this is a person that saved my life. That's going to be one PC. The other PC, this is someone I hate. This is someone who has wronged me or stole my sheep, or whatever my thing I'm going to pick is. But it already fuels me, gives me some stuff, to play against when I'm at the table. I think a lot of times in RPGs we have these, especially when we're listening to like YouTube or Twitch, like sometimes PCs start talking to each other and we realize we don't have anything to say to each other until this plot progresses a little farther. And it's like, how can we build PCs and the reason that happens is because there's no conflict. The reason we have so much dead time between players a lot of the time is because there's no conflict between them, which is because it's a communal event where you guys are all working together to defeat something that's bigger than all of you. But if you can find some conflict between each other, it usually allows you, if what we're talking about is helping players learn to role play, conflict is usually the thing that will help you. And trying to remember inside of that conflict that you're all there to have a good time and take care of each other and don't be a dick. But I
absolutely agree. And with Alien, I love the who's your favorite and who's your least favorite other party member.
Who's your
It
buddy?
is
Who's your rival?
it is
Mhm.
so simple and so effective. And one of the things which when I was younger, I was forced on us the hard way, and it was my mantra for years is I never allowed character versus character like fighting. I was like, every
Mhm.
time that happens, the game quickly descends into crap.
Mhm.
So I just wouldn't allow it, mostly because we were a bunch of teenage little monsters, and it just ended up becoming battle royale or
Yep.
something between the party. It ended with nobody except for whoever the victor was thinking that that was fun, and maybe they didn't even think it was fun, but everybody else was miserable. And so the idea of like you can have conflict with another character and they still be very near and dear to you, or and not be that they're your enemy. They're just that coworker that annoys you, or and in my group, two of my players for some reason have this magical dynamic that they always end up with the characters that dislike each other or
Mhm.
have a very strained relationship. Uh, and it works great because they will work together, but that the whole time they get to role play weird arguments, or they get to role play their resentment, how I am always having to save your ass, or how you're the one that's always getting us in trouble. But they still are doing it. So it's the rival, but it's not enemy. And the same thing with the close connections. Absolute game changer once we started using that in games,
Mm.
because you're right. Otherwise, it was me as the game master trying to inject the conflict and inject the drama, and but that the idea of like the players can have their sort of mild character versus character, but in that rival way. Absolutely wonderful. That's actually when I do have to sometimes step in as the game master. Like, while you guys are having this discussion, something happens to keep this game on track, because you guys have been debating how to make a peanut butter jelly sandwich the right way for 5 minutes. And I know you're impassioned, but come on, guys,
Yeah.
let's kill us a shoggoth.
I think it's the reason that not the reason, but our reason you have a cleric in your party in D&D. I think it's you have these conflicts that arise through belief and through like law and arguments, or why dwarves and elves need to have that antagonistic relationship that creates all this fun stuff for people to play. I think, and I think Call of Cthulhu. I think that to me, I have a group that I run it for. They're all actors, and for me, those guys it's like they're on skis when they play Cthulhu, because it is just right home base for them, as far as they have these full real characters with complicated wants and needs. And I just think it adds so much to it, because I mean, really, for our group, the joy of it is the investigation, finding all the things we didn't think we could find, and the
Oh
horrific
yeah.
ending, of course, but inside of that, the character development.
Well, one of the things I think a lot of GMs had issues with when they're going to a game like Call of Cthulhu, if they're leaving D&D, in D&D, it's just assumed that your character is an adventurer.
Mm.
After that, we've got your race, your class, your alignment, blah blah blah. But there's one thing for certain: you're an adventurer. You would be somebody that goes into the dungeon, and that's actually a really niche little category right there. Well, with Call of Cthulhu, it's like I'm a cab driver,
Right.
and you know,
I'm an antiquarian.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's no
Yeah.
reason why we would be in a room. There's no logical reason why we would be in a room and then go, you know what we ought to do? Let's check out the basement. Let's go to the basement together. So part of that is, you get to actually have a round character. And then it is up to the player, a lot of it, to help find that motivation, because the game master can give you like, this is why you should probably do the investigation. And sometimes it's okay, how can my character find the motivation to do this based off of this and this? You kind of know your character a lot more. And I found them, I guess, more rounded and less caricature-y once we started getting into um, those type of investigative games. When before it was usually, let's go into the dungeon, kill the monster, take its items, get more gold, get more power, rinse and repeat. And we
Yeah.
would have a lot of fun. And then we would get to Call of Cthulhu, where half the time we don't even get paid.
Right.
And yet half the time we don't even notice that. It's like, should we gotten paid for this job? Like, oh yeah, he pays you all $60. Yeah, thanks. And like,
Yeah.
because we're so into the
Paid
investigation.
in food stamps.
Right. Your credit rating has changed slightly. Yeah, exactly.
Last game, after John and I had that talk about credit rating, I had a character's credit rating go from 89 to 90. And he has been sending me images of the house that he is going to buy. Like my phone, he just started spamming me pictures. He's so excited because his reputation went up enough. And after I talked about, well, all of a sudden people come in with business opportunities, and this is how you get that level of money. But 89 to 90 is a big step. It's my buddy George, and he is so excited because he is also now officially the richest person in the group, which is for his character. It was like the number one goal. So he's so thrilled.
That's awesome.
I was thinking about this, what could non-professional actors do, thinking about with role playing. And something that comes to mind for me is spotlight. With actors, they're accustomed to the assumption being that these are actors who are playing characters with speaking roles, and they're, moving the story forward, which is exactly what your characters do in a role-playing game, right? We're playing the heroes. We're not playing the extras or the background characters, right? So everybody, ideally, assumingly, would be having a speaking role. And I think that's something that some people need help with. They need to remember that the spotlight needs to move around. There are some players, and I've been guilty of this myself, where because I'm living my life with me as the main character, every time I think there's an opportunity to inject ideas, inject conversation, and contribute to something that I think is going to move the story forward, I forget that I'm taking that spotlight, and there might have been somebody else who wanted it or needed it, and it's important for the player. I think it's important that the players remember that we should all have that same opportunity to try and do that. And as a keeper, sometimes I have had to, feels like I'm physically grabbing that light and turning it, especially at a convention, right? Especially, brand new players are meeting each other. And I was at a con one time, and I remember a father and son had joined the table, and there was a few other folks, and the son was, 16, 17. So not a tot, but maybe that person, it seemed to me like they were maybe not quite comfortable, speaking up. And eventually I did. I grabbed the light and I turned it towards the 16-year-old, and I said, "What are you thinking about this situation? What would you be doing here?" And there was that moment where he turned and looked at his dad, and his dad was like, just kind of nodding and like, "Yeah, he asked you, what are you doing?" And he finally got to like speak and everything, and it was really neat to see him kind of start to play. And some of the other players did catch up on that, and so they were like, "What about you?" And they would start conferring with each other. But spotlight is something that I think is important, that players need to remember that everybody needs time in the light.
I see it a lot. Like if you're watching a really good and experienced improv troupe, where they have that rapport where they could literally pass the spotlight back and forth like they're tossing a ball. Like that to them is actually part of the fun. So especially so you do see some actors that have worked together several times. They have that sort of dynamic where you aren't watching one of them, and they're fully aware that the audience, what they like is the troupe or the duo or whatever it is, and they're part of their enjoyment or their shtick or what's enjoyable about them is the fact that they are constantly throwing the spotlight back and forth to each other, giving each other the setups, and not hogging it and not letting anybody kind of fall into the back. And that's that's one of the things that I've loved with my group, because we played together so long, is that's just something they instinctively do now, where it's we are not always having to wrestle that one hog who makes the whole game about themselves, and everybody's very aware of everyone else's fun. And
Dude, I am right here. Calling me out. I feel seen.
like, if you stop, I will stop giving my passive aggressive little hints here.
I do think I was going to say too, also on the idea of like tips for players and stuff like that. The idea of something that can help maybe you step into the spotlight if that's something that you feel nervous about is an impossible want. If you're running a Call of Cthulhu game, I think especially that's a really nice thing for to work on, both for keepers, for NPCs, but for players. This is something directors like. I think it would be probably Chekhov that would be like who we look to as like all of his characters are kind of defined by this. But it's also like, I don't know, David Foster Wallace talks about it a lot in his writing and stuff like that. But a lot of what like defines us as humans, but then also defines us in this 21st century, but also, I don't know, something that I think can be really potent in Call of Cthulhu is setting your character up with some want that is impossible to ever fully achieve. David Foster Wallace has that famous quote about like, you'll die a million deaths if you look for like to be beautiful enough. Like you'll never be beautiful enough. If you try and have enough money, you'll always be looking for more money. Like that's for him. He's like, that's why religion is something worth like dedicating yourself to, because at least maybe that's not something that will slowly kill you. But like if money is your ultimate desire, you will never fill that hole. That was like something I thought when you were talking about your character or your player that moved up in the credit rating. I was like, that could be a really cool character trait if now he's like, I need more. Like this, and not even in a negative way, or at least how he sees it. Like this defines who I am. And so I need more.
I love your point of the impossible goal, because a lot of times, there's the like what motivates your character. And they might give something rather simple that we could do in a couple sessions. And it's like, okay, what do we do once that is achieved? One of the player types that I sometimes rail on, we've always called the 13th Warrior, which is when we'd have the weirdo show up in the theme game that just doesn't match the theme. And we're always trying to justify why the Arab poet's hanging out with the Vikings. But then also, why are they sticking around? The Hobbit is another example of one. We've got this badass dwarf campaign that Tolkien put together, but then Larry decided to bring in this middle class stoner kind of rich dude for no reason at all. And then once they get the job, he just goes home. He's like, "Well, did the job.
Yeah,
time to go home." And it was like,
yeah.
Well, how do you keep your character still going if you actually have an achievable goal? So I do like okay, you want more money, more money, or you do want something that's a theoretical type thing of.
Yeah, and I think we as humans, it's kind of a difficult thing to talk about, but it kind of defines all of us, almost all of us. Like we can find the one thing that maybe we can't put into words quite, but it's the thing that drives all of our choices. It's like a really simplistic way to look at it might be like, John, I know you're into comics, like Spider-Man. Like I think his impossible want is not to have let that guy go by in the hallway so that his uncle died. Or, his impossible want is to change who he was in that moment. And so with great power comes great responsibility is a beautiful phrase, but that comes from guilt. It comes from hurt. It comes from him knowing that he's broken. It comes from the impossible want to have been someone else in the past. And that defines his every choice from then on.
Not having his uncle die.
Right. So for the rest of his life, that impossible want defines his life and his choices and the jobs he chooses, the superhero pursuit, all of it. His self-worth, and like, I think that's why Marvel movies are a little bit easier to succeed cinematically, because a lot of those Marvel characters have impossible wants. Whereas outside of maybe like even Batman's arguable, but DC mostly is kind of archetypes of Greek myth and more almost ideas, which are cool when we talk about them. And their most successful comics are like Frank Miller, when in Dark Knight, like referencing Batman is the coolest moments. Not so much being with Batman, but when the reporters are talking about Batman, we're like, that's badass because we're talking about archetypes. But like Marvel has that like emotional connection to its audience because of Impossible Wants. And so I guess I would just say to like a player, like, can you find a way to set yourself up with a want without putting a negative judgment on it, but like something that's impossible, like for your father to still be alive or to have been good enough to marry that girl in high school that got away. And that defines everything. That's why you're this high charisma character, because you couldn't get that one girl. And then that informs all your other choices and creates conflict.
That is really cool. Yeah.
I wasn't expecting this much self-reflection in this conversation, huh? I feel like I've just made a breakthrough in therapy all of a sudden.
I'm here for you.
All right. So Drew, tell me, is it different for you being experienced in reading and directing and assuming writing scripts and things like that? Is it different for you to as a gamer, do you approach a published adventure and prepare for it? How does that compare to like doing a script or reading and preparing a script for direction?
Yeah, I think it's like, so for me, and every director is going to approach things differently, but like for me, the thing that works for me is I want to fill myself up with so much information that I can walk into the room as a director and not even really need to think about it. Like it's living inside my head. I think it's a reason, like a lot of people worship Critical Role, like Matt Mercer's GMing style. And I think he's cool, but I think that his thing that he really succeeds at is he has such a mastery over his world and that game rule set that he's able to be present at the table. And I think that is the link between being a director on film or being a game master is like it. And I know there's a big push right now, especially with like Mork Borg and a lot of OSR stuff and like Mothership. I know there's a big push for like, I want to have just a thing I can bring and do it that night. And that's great. But the thing to remember about those things is usually they're like 2 or 3 pages. So even then, when the idea is that like it's no prep, you should still have looked over it, but also like they've set you up to succeed. And I think that just in my opinion, that the connection for me is like, can I put myself in a position to succeed by doing that work beforehand? And I actually do look at it as work. Like if I'm getting ready to run, like I'm running The Haunting for the 3rd or 4th time right now and going back over it. And I really like the Corbett, like I like the old man in the mansion, like basement one. I think that's really, I don't know, for me, it really ticks a lot of boxes. I think it's a lot of fun.
I love The Haunting.
Yeah.
I love it.
And I'm still kind of poring over it and just trying to make sure there's nothing I missed. 1, because I enjoy looking at it, but 2, it allows me to, this time, maybe I'm going to do something different with the knife, or this time, it allows me to be open to things happening at the table. So I think that, yeah, that's the thing. I'm almost talking in circles at this point, but the thing is about preparation, I think.
Yeah, no, I totally get you on that. In fact, it was funny you mentioned Mork Borg. There was a book published not long ago called I think it's called Distant Whispers, and it's just filled with a whole bunch of really small adventures, for a variety of different game systems, a lot of 5e and a lot of OSR stuff, and including Mork Borg. And so I was running one of the Mork Borg scenarios out of Distant Whispers, and it's a fairly small dungeon, and the impetus for the characters to go into this thing is they're looking for a suit of armor that had been lost down there, and they found the suit, and then the players were just so clever in the moment on how to get that suit out of the hole that it was in, which I don't think the author thought of. And I was sitting there going, I just feel like I'd be a dick if I said no, because it was such a clever idea. It was basically, a makeshift fishing line. And I'm like, yeah, that works. And so they were going to end up circumventing everything. They were like, we're going to take this or we're going to get out.
Yeah.
And the big bad was in the room next to them. And I was like, well, they're going to get that armor. I'm going to let them have that. But now I'm changing the big bad. And I basically turned it into a giant undead creature, like so giant that it's crawling to get through the tunnels,
Mm-hmm.
it's just on its belly crawling, and it chased those people right out of the dungeon, and it was awesome. But they just had such fun, and we had a good time, and everyone loved that this freaking giant came out of nowhere and just started crawling through the dungeon at him.
Yeah, and you got to give them the experience of impacting the world. Like they changed the world. And I think they knew that. Like they knew they had made a choice with the rope thing where they were like, "Oh, we're doing something maybe interesting, unexpected, or at least, and that is such a rewarding feeling. I think that's so exciting."
I was just say players will always come up with something that no one could have prepared for. So I'm always about like, I'm going to prepare everything I can beforehand, because in the end, I'm going to be improvising my butt off. And if I can use those brain cells before the game, and I don't have to like exert them during the game to come up with this, I'm going to do it, knowing perfectly well that in the end they're going to be like, let's make a fishing line and get the armor out. It's like, okay, shit, okay, let's improvise this, because they're always going to do something unexpected. Sometimes it's brilliant, and sometimes you're sitting the whole time going, really, guys, oh my god, this is, do you not see the glaring flaw here?
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta let them fail. I think that the thing about the question about modules too, like how to use a module. I think the thing that I really learned as an actor that I was trained was you treat text like scripture. You treat it like every word is on purpose, every comma is a choice, and every period matters. Like you try and treat this writer like they meant to do everything they did. And so the idea of kind of just winging it, as opposed to you memorize this word for word, you're off book. That is the goal, and you're word perfect. And if you're not, that's not acting. That's something else. That's improv. If you're off book and then making choices inside of that, that's doing the thing. That's the goal. And then like when I'm teaching Shakespeare or like directing Shakespeare, my opinion on that is you learn how it works so that you can break it if you need to. You use that poetry, you learn the system inside of that poetry and how that worked then and how it works now. But you don't get to change it or break it until you understand why it works. And I think it's kind of the same thing with a module for me. I need to understand it so that when it's happening in the room, I can break it. New things, the giant undead crawling monster can happen, but I understand the echoes of that. I understand why that matters.
Well, with something like Shakespeare, there you will have an audience member that has the entire play memorized, and they will catch the slightest deviation. So pretty much all the actors are left with is how they deliver certain lines. That's why is it Baz Luhrmann, the DiCaprio version of Romeo and Juliet, was the first time in my life I actually understood what the hell they were saying in Romeo and Juliet. They were delivering the same dialogue, but they were delivering it like people, versus I'd always heard it and they were trying to ponder every word, and I had no idea what they were talking about half the time. But all of a sudden then you have Mercutio rapid firing this bizarre rant, and I was totally on board with it the whole time, because he delivered it like people today deliver it, versus seizing every word and trying to measure the weight of every single line. He just blew through it rapid fire, and I'm like, yep, totally get this, I know what they're talking about. And so
cool.
That with a play or a script, you are limited in that. And I always referred to modules as a script. I've actually started changing that to being a recipe, because a really good cook will take a recipe and they'll eyeball it, be all like, yeah, I'm adding cinnamon, and but they still see it's like, oh, I followed the recipe, even though what they did, what the recipe said, were theoretically in the same room, but they just took it and they made it their own, or they made it better. And that's part of the reason why, with a lot of good cooks, you can't recreate what they did, because every time they're eyeballing it. Like, I think this needs more salt today than yesterday. And they just know it so well. So I've started adapting more of a recipe look at them versus the script, just because, what would Julia Childs do instead of what would Gary Gygax do, I think is how we need to look at modules a lot of the ways. Or, that one, I guess you could still say, what would the author want? If the author had known they were going to fishing line the armor out, what do I think they would have done? Well, based off my knowledge of them, which is limited, big giant monster's going to chase him through the tunnel like that dragon on Dragon Slayer. It's going to be epic as shit. Okay, then that's what I'm going to do.
Right. I love that. I love your analogy of the cook. Like, you've got a recipe, but then what happens? I think that's a lot like live theater, where it's like you have a recipe, but the thing that happens with a live audience can only happen once. And it's the same thing as what happens at a table. It's only ever going to happen that one time, and then it's dead. It's mortal. It's gone forever. It'll never be the same. And that's what makes it so exciting. It's what makes role playing so fun.
Oh yeah, you can't say a joke to the same audience twice and get the same reaction. There's that moment, and it happens once. So hopefully it's a beautiful moment. But
right,
that's all you get.
Yeah.
So Drew, is there anything? I mean, it seems like you seem pretty confident with the directing and the acting, and I feel like I would feel that same confidence at the game table, right? If you were my keeper, I'd be excited for that game, right?
Yeah,
I have to ask, is there anything that you fear in a game? Is there anything you're not ready for, or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely, I would say, it'd be dishonest for me to say, like, everything that I've brought up at this point, I'm sure are things I've battled with, the things that I worry about. I think I definitely have that piece of my head that, like, is sending out texts at the end of the session being like, I love you guys so much. Thanks for playing. That was awesome. Because I have that, like, need for validation that it was good, like that I'm focused on a different thing. Like, God, I hope they had a good time. I think so. That fear is always there. Like, I think acting or any of those, I have that, like, you have to have this armor of confidence, but then there's that piece of you, like a lot of reason that actors like get into, not all, but some actors get into acting is like the need for that validation. And I'm sure there's some piece of that in running a game. I think for me, one reason I love Call of Cthulhu is I'm still trying to learn to make money matter, giving out money and having it mean anything. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just not interested in it thematically. I think the thing I'm always interested in is like a morally gray choice versus another morally gray choice. Like, that's like my signature session is two shitty choices and try and pick the one that works the best for you. But like, I think I fear conflict sometimes. Like, I think I grew up in a home where it was kind of my responsibility to make sure everyone was okay. And maybe that wasn't even the reality, but it was something I felt, and I think I still have that. And especially at a table around people that I like care about, like a need for everyone to be okay and having a good time, and maybe avoiding conflict at sometimes when maybe it would be actually more interesting to just sort of push back a little harder. And I think, I do kill characters, but I wish I killed them more. I think that's something especially Cthulhu. Yeah.
I have some of the longest lived Cthulhu characters that I always feel bad. But so I understand that one. Like, man, I wish I did it more, but I love this character so much. I also know that some of those characters are lightning in a bottle. Like, their next character might suck. I want to keep this one around.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I'm pretty good at killing at least one or two, like every other like adventure. Like, probably one or two an adventure is probably fair, but like, I don't know. I just want some wipes. I don't know. There's some dark piece of me that really wants some Cthulhu, like, hopelessness.
I do have a good friend who, his role playing experience has always been D&D. Long running fantasy characters, that leveled up and just kept leveling, and that was before he and I were friends. So then when he and I became friends, started gaming together, it didn't take long, and his characters had a very short lifespan in my games, right? And so it's gotten to the point where he's like, "Are you going to kill me again?" And I'm like, "What? You're making these choices. I'm just reacting."
Yeah.
He just gets so frustrated, and he's like, and then some characters will live, and he'll end up dying. He's like, "Why did he get to live?" Like, it's choices, man. It's just choices.
Yeah.
So I have one player who has probably done 75% of my dying at our games. Like I've got characters I've lived for years. They just never die. At
Oh my
his
God.
are they always die, and it's just kind of phenomenal because we look at it and we're like, oh, we had a character that's like, oh yeah, that was Jesse, and that was Jesse again. And we've never been able to figure out what it is. He is dice cursed. He has a legitimate, like, I should bring this guy to some sort of like a show to prove that dice curse exists. Of like, Jesse, demonstrate. But part of it is when it comes to those choices, I don't blame where many of his choices come from if I was in his shoes, but he has a supernatural ability to always choose the wrong one. And then his dice will screw him and he realizes it's the bad choice. Just phenomenal. So I don't think it's he's dumb. I think it's he's just really gifted. You've got two options. Which one do you take? I'm going to take the one that's going to lead to my death. Like, okay, let's dance.
Well, and it's nice to have those players that want to poke and prod at the world. I feel like I have one in each group of mine that I play with consistently that are the ones whose guys die often, but they're also the ones who want to go and press the button. They're the ones who want to go down the elevator. They're the ones who like they'll hear a noise and they're going to go check out what it is, even though they know it's bad. And it does create memories, if nothing else.
Whenever my group starts getting a little too careful, and it's happened in every game we've played, they get a little too careful, they're a little too cautious. I do like bringing in some new blood of, like I just need a little bit of Leroy Jenkins here, guys. I just need somebody that will be all like, screw it, I'm opening up the door instead of going through our 47-point checklist first.
Yeah. Yeah. I like hearing about your session, Seth, too, and just the fact that, and Jon, I've enjoyed hearing about, because I don't have any real experience in going to conventions and running or playing games. Like, and I don't know that I've had a huge interest in it just because it hasn't been a big part of my life. It's what I associate with like close friends or events. And for Seth, I was just going to say, I've been, your Cthulhu for me is always such an interesting, like, because you've talked a couple times about how long lived a couple of these characters are. And to me, it just seems like, I don't want to say hopeful, but just like a world of like, it's cool that these guys, but like what an awful friggin' place for them to be living in. If it's the kind of Lovecraftian world, but they've been exposed to their own infinitesimally small existence and how meaningless they are. And it's like, is it evil that they're still alive? It's like, it's a good.
Well, that's just it. It hasn't been revealed yet, but they're the cultists. There it is. Nyarlathotep is looking out for them. So.
Most of my Cthulhu reviews are actually about the same group, so you just assemble those. So I have had a character who has stabbed Nyarlathotep with Thoth's dagger, who did cuss out the Wendigo and Cold Warning, and she has a list of every single Mythos god that she has interacted with. But I think our last game we just finished up the Crimson Letters. I think her maximum sanity is 39 right now. So we are getting so close to permanent insanity. Her Mythos is freaking high, but she's at the point where like, it's coming. We're actually going to get permanent insanity by getting them down to 0. I've had characters that have gotten down to the single digits and pulled through it, and they recovered, and we kept going with them, but we've never actually had one hit 0. So I will probably feel sad when that happens, because it's like, wow, it's like this big chapter has ceased.
That's funny.
Maybe she becomes if she's in a sanitarium or something, that becomes like this weird quest giver or prophet or person that the PCs visit that is like seen, so much.
I've actually started laying down the foundation for her retirement. We did the asylum where there was a Yith, and she had interacted with the Yith in another adventure, and so she was able to identify it, but the Yith knew who she was. And the Yith are actually, we're kind of working, this is actually going to be her retirement. So retirement probably will be going to become with the Yith at the end of this, her whole arc. Who knows? God knows. Probably what it'll end up doing is going to be something so lame. We're all going to sit there and feel really unsatisfied. Of like, Wow, at this whole time, after all you've been through, it was a hobo with a rusty dagger. It took you out.
Yeah, I was gonna say she catches a bullet somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just like,
That would be good. Just that I love the like. Yeah, to me, that's the ideal. It's like because that when you try and get like poetic with endings and horror, I always feel like the Stephen King. It's like the excitement is never there in that part of it, and it's hard. It's hard. I think it's the hardest part. The last
yeah.
paragraph of these adventures is the hardest part. I feel like.
Oh, Stephen King's your example because that man does not know how to end a book.
Right.
Like, he really has no clue. It's like The Stand is over. It's like there's like 400 more pages left. Like all of his books like kind of end, and it's like there's 27 more chapters,
Right.
except The Dark Tower, which
Right.
does actually for me win the best ending of all time. But
Huh.
he used up all his ending power on one series, and then after that is like, I don't know, I'll just keep writing till my typewriter screams at me. So that's Stephen
Yeah.
King's writing method.
It feels to me too like a writer that is I talked to about earlier, like present, like one of the most present writers. That when he's writing, he's doing it like a workman, right? He's doing it every day. He's putting the work in. But like, I think his writing reads that way, if that makes any sense. Like he's very new ideas are coming to him as he's writing this, and it's incredibly exciting and incredibly moving. But yeah, the whole idea of an arc is harder because he doesn't write with an end in sight.
Yeah, just keeps going.
Yeah, yeah.
He'll fall asleep at some point, and then his kids will come in and go,
That's enough. That's enough. Yeah. Pat.
So, Drew, you've told us about Shakespeare and Chekhov. What else inspires you with your gaming? Any current media or other games, or
Oh yeah.
what inspires Drew?
I was just gonna throw out first thing that popped in my head is I've really been into lately ZXU's writing. This is the guy who wrote the Thousand Islands. He wrote Lorne's Song of the Bachelor.
Oh, right.
He is incredible. He is a profound voice in Southeast Asia that is publishing kind of independently. You can grab that Thousand Islands bundle sometimes, but you can grab the PDF. I would recommend Lorne's Song of the Bachelor, just like a solo adventure of his. They're all system independent. Like you don't need, I think they're great Cthulhu adventures, but they take place in a kind of mystical and mythical Southeast Asia. Lorne's Song of the Bachelor is about a crocodile on a river that can't be killed and is the size of a couple of men that's kind of haunting a village. And there's much more to it, but I wouldn't want to ruin it. But I would just say that his style of writing is this kind of really succinct. He gets to the point. He does the opposite of what I do. He gets to the point in like one sentence. And it does the thing that I think Morkborg and a lot of these other OSR, Mothership, all those are really trying to do, but it does it so well and so efficiently. In like 3 sentences, he gives you everything you need as a game master to create a very full character. And in like 6 sentences, he gives you everything you need for a village. And then it's just lots of tables of people that you meet and things that could occur. Most of his stuff is like pamphlet booklet size. So ZXU, I would really recommend that. That was like the first thing that really exploded into my head. I was going to ask you two if you'd played 10 Candles.
I have not yet. I have a buddy of mine who has it. He's told me about it, and we just haven't been able to connect yet to play it. But I'm excited to play 10 Candles once it finally happens.
It's on my short list of things I want to pick up and check out once my current slog of what we're going to be checking out is done. Because I've got so many things in the queue. 10 Candles is on the short list because every time I'm like, let me try something, I always forget about that. When somebody mentions 10 Candles, I was like, oh yeah, I need to check this thing out because I've heard so much good stuff. But I actually have intentionally, I know very little about it, except for like the most limited things. It's like the people that love it. So I'd like to check it out. I've heard that might be up my style.
Yeah, I think it's a great like one-off.
I would love to see that or get to read it and hopefully play it. But we got too much in the pipeline right now. I need to focus up, otherwise my ADD will kick in and then I'll just seize and I'm not going to run anything.
I was just thinking as people who play Cthulhu as and maybe the listeners as like people who play the Cthulhu, which is to me speaks to people who love kind of high dramatics of like interesting involved characters, like paying a heavy cost, and then also like props and stuff. Like there's handouts and cool clippings and stuff like that. Like kind of
You're
that
just selling it to me.
like so that I'm talking about Cthulhu there, but like for I think Candles has a lot of that stuff that's analogous, and I was just thinking that like the biggest piece of it is having these like 10, I think it's pieces of there's 10 candles, and they're blowing out as you play the game, so you're in darkness by the end of it, and that's when the game ends, and that's when the sad bad ending happens. But it's about what happens while the light is on, what happens while these 10 candles are lit that are slowly going out. And then the kind of poetic thing that I think is really beautiful and interesting is everyone has a couple strips of paper where they've written defining characteristics or hopes or fears about their character. And by burning those in the candles, you're kind of, by burning away pieces of yourself, you're keeping the lights on a little bit longer. And it's this really beautiful end of the world story, or it can be about anything. But the kind of cinematic nature of it mixed with kind of the ambient nature of like, it also is kind of an anti-COVID game. Like you need to all be in the same room together and slowly going into the dark. The first time I played it was in Door County out in the middle of nowhere, so it was really just pitch black by the end of it. It was amazing. But yeah, that is a game that I think I was also just going to throw out The Quiet Year as another small independent game that I think is really beautiful. That for you guys or for listeners that are trying to reach people maybe that don't traditionally play role-playing games, The Quiet Year is a kind of a map building game. Would be the map building role-playing game. You all sit around a piece of paper and you build a world together, and all you need is the rules and a deck of cards. And basically the short, concise explanation is there's a deck of cards, you flip the card, you look on your little rule sheet what the card means, and usually it's a choice of two things. And of those two things, they usually ask you to create something. So a mysterious person comes into town, or there's been a famine. What is that famine? And you create that at the table. And the reason it's called The Quiet Year is because only the person whose turn it is gets to talk. And what that does is creates this really interesting like social anxiety about the culture of the people, because only one person is allowed to be talking. And so it starts bringing up this interesting idea about how society works and how it's hard to hear each other, and voices kind of making statements, kind of like how Twitter works, like just a lot of statements being made, but not a lot of conversation.
Damn, that sounds really cool.
I've got like my list I'm working on here. How do you spell ZXU? ZXU?
Zedeck. And then Siew is Siew. Lorne the Bachelor is what I started with, but
I was doing U as in university. So okay.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and his the artist that he works with is just unbelievable. I want to say it starts with an M. I can't remember. It's one word, but they just had a Kickstarter called Reach of the Roach God that was very successful, and so they're going to have their first like fat book, like campaign, coming out probably next year. But I just think, to me, he's one of, if not the most important voice in like the writing sphere of like in this age of where we're trying to listen to other voices that aren't us and come from a completely different lifestyle. We're trying to come to understand other worlds and listen to each other. I just think he's got a profound voice that's worth listening to, and is just insanely talented for his age.
Okay.
That is awesome. Yeah, there's other role-playing games like that I've heard about that I haven't played, but I want to play. Is like Bluebeard's Brides.
I was about to just name that one.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard fantastic things with that one.
Yeah. So cool. Yeah, those are great suggestions. It's interesting. I've recently, I am a die-in-the-wool Call of Cthulhu guy, but I've been reaching out and trying other games. And one that I've been wanting to get my head wrapped around, and I've had a hard time doing it, is Yellow King, because, the gumshoe system.
Mm-hmm.
And I reread it again recently, and I feel like now it has finally clicked. Like I feel like I could run Yellow King in its version of gumshoe, which they call a quick shock gumshoe. So combat is run differently. Physical and mental health is run differently. And I think I could understand that now. Whereas Trail of Cthulhu is still something that is, as a concept, so foreign to me. I want to be able to do that game. I want to be able to play, but then I read it and I go, I just don't get it still.
Totally.
I don't know. I have a mental block for it or something.
No, I hear you in that.
You got Chaosium Con coming up, John. So if you're ready with Yellow King, man, I'll sit at your table.
Ooh.
I will bring it.
If not, we could just hide in a hotel room with a bottle of Crown and
just do it there.
We can do that too.
I just had one more that I want to throw out just in case. Luca Rayatz is
Yes.
He's the writer of Ultraviolet Grasslands and Witchburner and a couple others, but those are my two favorites. And I think he's another voice that's like anything we can do to like pull him up and get more people playing his games. I think Ultraviolet Grasslands is incredible. I've been running that as with the Mutant Year Zero engine, basically Alien. I've been running it with the Alien engine, but I've been playing Ultraviolet Grasslands, which I would describe as Oregon Trail on acid. Yeah, it's
Jesus,
amazing.
That's a great title.
It's an incredible. So Ultraviolet Grasslands is you're just doing the Oregon Trail, but everything's insane. And the farther west you get, the wilder the world is. It's a very I don't want to go too far into it, but it's incredible. And then the other one that he wrote was Witchburner, which is you're a party that shows up in a small village. There's a witch, find him and burn him. And then spoilers. So stop listening for 5 seconds if you want to hear this. There's no witch. And that's the amazing story that you're going to tell. It's incredible.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Okay, so my notes are getting really long now.
And those are all system neutral, John. So I'm like you, where like I know a couple systems, and like, I'm like you in that like I'm not super excited always to dive into like the gumshoe system, but if I can find a creator that's doing system neutral stuff, that's awesome for me.
Yeah, it's for me, because I think most everybody who's into role playing has a version of a fantasy game that they like, and for me, I have two flavors. It's either super gonzo, where it's just super fun, and in which case it's Dungeon Crawl Classics.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can get any better for gonzo. But if I want to do something that feels more heroic or just more cinematic and characters that are going to level up and live a long time, I go super skimmed down, bare bone rules, and I go Swords and Wizardry, just because it's so pliable. I can just do. You don't have to know a lot. You know the basics, and then you can just make up the rest. And it's always been my experience that players are like, sure, I don't know what that rule is. Let's do that instead. And they go with it, and it's fun. I like to be able to be in charge, of be able to just adjudicate on the fly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because what's happening is right now in that moment, and that's all that's important, right? I think that's the big keeper secret, right? Is that make the call and keep moving. And if people want to debate it, like work it out, know that you're all there for the same reason, to tell a good story, keep moving, as opposed to go into that book is where you die. In my opinion, that's
nothing kills a game faster than having to stop and check the book. Like, so it's probably a thing of the game master does not need to know every rule off the top of their head, but they need to be confident enough that they can make a judgment call. And feel that that's the best call, whether it's actually what the rules say or not. They're like, no, I'm confident enough that I'm not breaking the game by giving this call. Let's just charge onward, merry soldiers, because if we waste 5 minutes digging the book, the moment is gone by the time we figure it out. So let's just charge.
Yeah.
Drew, I had a blast talking to you today. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I admire both your guys' work a lot. I used your stuff you talked about. The Code, is that what it is? The Code is I brought that into Ultraviolet Grasslands. We did a one-shot in a mansion with a time machine, a device, and it was a huge hit.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I watched your YouTube of you running it, and I thought it was fantastic. And Seth, I think just thanks for all the people you've brought into Call of Cthulhu. And you were the first person I saw talking about it. And, just, I appreciate your work. I think what you guys do matters a lot, and you're helping people tell, stories that help them get closer together, help people build empathy. So thanks.
Wow, I feel so warm now. Thank you.
Let's hug it out. Thanks for being on the show, Drew.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It was great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Seth, let's give a shout out to our patrons. If you are listening to this show and you like what you hear and want to help us out, please consider joining our Patreon account. Link will be in the show notes. It's www.patreon.com/modern_mythos.
And we also have a Discord, which you can come and chat with us or chat with other fans. Sometimes we'll answer questions if we said anything vaguely, or if you have any ideas. For example, Drew reached out to us on Discord, and that's how we ended up having this episode. So definitely swing by, give us a shout, and just talk to us and see what all we can do.
We have a YouTube, which really is all thanks to Seth, because he is our YouTube guru. So if you like the show, check it out on YouTube. And Seth, I love how you will kind of add a few little quirks in there, like the Cthulhu wink every now and then. So that's neat.
You can also find us on Facebook, where we can, once again, if you're not on the Discord, just swing by, talk to us there, and share us a link, share us a meme, and maybe give us some ideas or ask any questions. If you've got any advice that you're looking for, just hit us up.
And we also have an RSS link that's in the show notes. You can use that and just put it in your favorite podcatcher. We cannot do this show alone. We want to thank our amazing editors, Max Mahaffa and Edwin Nagy, for their hard work and keen skills in making us sound awesome.
Thank you, guys. And we also want to thank John Sumrow for our badass logo. He is a very talented artist, so please follow him on Facebook, check out his official website, and please consider joining his Patreon account. Once again, links in the show notes.
And finally, we want to thank the Darkest of the Hillside Thickets for generously allowing us to use their song Gluttony as both our intro and outro music. If you're a fan of Lovecraft's writing and the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game, then you need to check out the Darkest of the Hillside Thickets. Please check out their Bandcamp site and their official website. Links will be in the show notes.
Thanks for listening.